Welcome, everyone. This is
Mm.
season 5 of Indie Reads Aloud. We're so excited to give you all a new season of wonderful stories. Today on the program, James Wittenborg is here. He is um, he's an amazing author. He's going to actually be reading from his fourth book today. But I encourage you to come back because he's going to be returning to read from his series as well. I'm Diana Catherine Penn, your host, and today, James Wittenborg. How are you, Jim?
Good morning. Doing great. Doing great.
Great. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm really excited about this book. It is a fairly new release just this past year, and I'm really excited because I know it's doing so well. It's a great story.
No, thank you. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your writing journey. How did you decide to go from being a NASA engineer person
hmm
to writing novels? How did you decide to take that leap?
I've enjoyed writing. I've dabbled in it for years. I used to write little short stories and poems just for myself, pretty much. They're buried up in the attic. And one day, it was funny. About 6 years ago, I just had a wild thought, just a dreamy sort of thought about going in the past and observing something that still is a question mark and unsolved. And I said, gosh, how could you do something like that? And I thought, what if you could dream your way back and, just to see it, then wake up and kind of know the truth, actually know it. And the more I thought about it, I just started jotting down a character who could do it, and then a thought process. And then I said, well, if I had that person go back there, and what could he do with that information? How would the story end? And I sort of found an ending to it.
And then
Um,
you discovered an entire trilogy of books.
well, when I was done with the first story, I left it at a point where it could possibly go on. And I said, that character is kind of neat. And I took him on another journey and then a third journey to finally just concluded. So it was just a something that happened. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it.
That's fantastic. So the series we're talking about is the Dream Traveler series, and as it stands right now, is a trilogy. But the story you're going to read from today is called The Five, and this is a standalone murder mystery novel. So my biggest question is, who is your favorite character in this novel and why?
Favorite character. Well, it's a story about five guys and they're very diverse. I sort of like the main character, Glenn. He has a good heart, but he's sort of all over the place. He goes through hardship in life, and boy, it's funny when you ask me who my favorite character is. When I write, I don't. I'm kind of like a parent. I don't have favorites. Uh, they're all my children. I try to develop them the same, and I enjoy who they are. I give them personalities, and I just say, okay, be who you are in the book. And so I really don't have a favorite. I don't think.
Okay.
I
I
know it's
guess
kind of a wishy-washy answer, but it's sort of unlike my first series where I really had a favorite in that one. This one, it's really five guys, and that's my favorite. Them as a group and how they
the
interact.
idea of the ensemble and how they interact together.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. I had a really good time reading this book. I thought it was very dynamic and super enjoyable to read, lots of twisty, turny things. Um, are you planning on writing a sequel to this?
No,
Okay.
I sequels are difficult. And thank you for being my editor and keeping me straight on that because being a fairly new writer, when you write a sequel and then a sequel to the sequel, you always have to keep in mind what you wrote before.
Indeed.
What they
Yeah.
look like, who they are, personalities, how they lived, grew up, education, and that's a hard thing to do if you don't log that down. And I was very bad at doing that, so I always had to go back to it, the original books and say, oh, that's what he looks like, or that's how old he is, or that's,
Yeah.
and it's hard. But this.
Yeah,
I
writing a series, you do have to keep more notes than with a standalone.
Yeah, and I ended this book on a point where I think it could be has a final
Yep,
resolution, and that's that. And in
yep.
fact, I'm already on a fifth book, and that one is actually sort of a sequel to the first three. So that
It's
it's
yeah, it's kind of a spin-off. Yeah,
yeah, with new
yeah.
characters. So
Right.
it's fun so far.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that one. But today you're going to read from the five.
The five, the standalone book, yes.
So when you are ready, please, Jim Wittenborg, take the microphone and read aloud.
Okay, just a quick 30-second blurb on this. The Five is a book about five gentlemen. They're in their mid to late 40s. They've known each other since elementary school. They go on their yearly guide trips every year to crazy places. And this time they go somewhere quieter. There's a certain reason why they do it. I won't get into that, but things happen. So, all right. So they've already gotten up to the upstate New York place. It's a quiet little town, and we're going to just take it from there. This
Excellent.
is chapter 4. The large dining area was filled with chatter from every table, in addition to the honky-tonk rhythm of country music playing in the background. Servers with trays crisscrossed each other, delivering drinks and plates piled with food. Occasionally, the sharp crack of colliding pool balls could be heard from the two tables in the back. The men were perusing the menu, all except Vinny, whose eyes were busy scanning the premises for potential conquests. He was the first to notice the ponytailed brunette heading toward the table. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Nancy, and I'll be your server tonight. Nancy Rooney was an attractive 28-year-old with dark green eyes and deep dimples that flashed when she smiled. She worked here since the age of 16. Unlike other female servers, Nancy didn't find it necessary to leave the top 2 buttons of her blouse purposely undone to entice larger tips. She didn't have to. The locals adored her, and first-time visitors were quickly won over by her charm and personality. 5 friendly-looking men in their mid to late 40s, no doubt on vacation, was exactly the type of table she enjoyed serving. She beamed her smile, wrote down their drink order, and scurried back to the bar. Vinny wore a devilish grin as his eyes tracked every step of her route. Steve looked over and shook his head. Keep it in your pants, Romeo. Vinny turned and smirked. What? I can't even look? She's not that young, you know. Glen remained oddly silent, while Tommy let out a short laugh. Relax. It looks like she's already got a boyfriend, or at least someone looking after her. Tommy rarely said much in public setting, but he always watched everything. He amazed the guys when asked about the smallest of details of places they had been. Soon it became a game whenever they went on their trips. They would walk into a bar, sit down at a table, and within a few minutes ask Tommy, without looking up, to tell them how many people were sitting at the bar and describe them. He was rarely ever wrong. Vinny followed up on Tommy's observation. What do you mean, a boyfriend? Everyone else at the table looked up from their menu and waited for Tommy's response. That thin guy in the flannel shirt at the end of the bar been slowly sipping his beer since we got here and hasn't taken his eyes off of our server yet. Maybe the jealous type, I don't know, but there's definitely a connection. Nancy skillfully navigated through the tables and returned with a tray of large mugs of beer. You gentlemen have any questions about the menu? Shep grabbed a mug, looked up, and pointed to Vinny. Oh, my friend here can never make up his mind. What do you recommend? Nancy shook her ponytail and smiled. First thing I recommend visitors is our prime rib. It's the best in the state, and it's our special tonight. Vinny was always looking for an opportunity to flirt and saw this as an opening. The dogs were barking in the background. Wait, what makes you think we're visitors? Suddenly, Steve gave Shep a wink and chimed in. Shep, are you still going to help me clear the fields later and work on the tractor? Before Shep had a chance to play along, Nancy slapped her thigh and laughed. I like you guys. Y'all are a hoot. First of all, I've been working here a whole lot of years, and I know just about every resident who walks through those doors. And second, those accents are a dead giveaway. Now, are we settled on the prime rib? The table exploded in laughter, and they all nodded in the affirmative. I'll tell the chef, to give you the best cut. While they raised their mugs and toast, Nancy disappeared into the kitchen. At the end of the bar, Kyle Wade Loftus continued to slowly sip his beer and watched her the whole way. Tommy also caught the man at the end of the bar, eyeing them as well. The prime rib was just as Nancy said it would be. Soon, their plates were empty, and the mugs were nearly dry. Most of the locals who came for the happy hour had filtered out. Many of the tables cleared out, as did half the patrons sitting at the bar, all except the guy in the flannel shirt, still seated at the far end. Nancy made numerous stops at their table, not just to bring refills, but also to check on the group of friendly visitors. After the third round of large mugs, the volume of their discussion and raucous laughter amplified. Vinny elbowed Shep and motioned toward the bar at a curvy woman ordering a drink. Shep looked over and rolled his eyes. Tommy smiled, but his attention was aimed more at the lone figure at the end of the bar. Nancy approached the table. How we doing, guys? Fantastic, Steve said. We'll be in town all week. That is, if you can put up with us. Nancy threw her head back and flashed a wide smile. I'll certainly try, Vinny looked up at Nancy with a devilish grin from across the table. So where do you go when you're not working? Out with the girls? Glen's jaw tightened, and the others gave Vinny a stern look. Nancy just laughed. Oh, I've got plenty to keep me busy. But honestly, I'd rather be working here. I meet the nicest people. The smile never left her face as she turned and headed back to the bar. This was a fun group, a nice break from the locals and visiting families she usually served. Nancy sensed they would be generous tippers. She put up with the typical flirting and always seemed to come from that one guy in every group, and she appeared to have each one of them pegged, except for one. He said very little the entire night and would always look away whenever she looked at him. He thought that perhaps he was just shy. Glen Feffley wasn't shy, he was awestruck. We'll take a break real quick. I'll be right back.
So if you're just joining us, we are listening to James Wittenborg read from his latest novel. It's a murder mystery, and it's about five guys who go on an annual trip every year. And this year they go someplace new and different, and they discover an interesting series of events.
I apologize for that break here. I had a dog that just wanted to be part of the podcast here, and I said, no, your
We
turn is
always
later.
we always let dogs come on the show. So now you're going to read a second scene for us. Can you set this up a little bit?
Yeah, the guys basically they had their wild night, first kind of crazy night at the bar there, noticing obviously a shady character at the end, and of course got friendly with the server. Now what happens is now they're going to find something to do. They're going to go on a fishing trip, and as they're going on there, something happens. Nancy doesn't show up for work, and so it's going to be introduced a little bit to a new character, the sheriff in town.
Excellent.
Okay. The drive took them 30 minutes, and they arrived at the Cayuga Fishing Charters parking lot just before 7 a.m. The air was calm, but on the cool side, and a cloudless sky lit the morning sun, promised a great day ahead. Glen opted to charter a boat rather than rent their own. The extra cost for a captain who would certainly know where to find the fish was an easy sell to the rest of the group. At the end of the parking lot was a small country store. The five wasted no time heading over to fill their coolers with ice and beer. With coolers in tow, they marched down the wooden pier that secured a row of gently bobbing vessels. Hey, look for the real deal, Glen shouted to the others. Up ahead, Shep stopped at the largest boat at the dock. Across its stern were the words, real deal, written in large script. Here you go, he shouted, as the rest of the group caught up. A weathered figure in his late 50s wearing a heavy vest and baseball cap ventured out of the boat's cabin. Morning, fellas. I'm assuming you're my party of five. After their acknowledgement, he continued, The name's Errol May. I'll be your captain today for a 6-hour charter. No need to call me captain, of course, unless you want to. Well, jump aboard and let's hit the high seas. The meter's running. He had the weathered look of a guy who obviously spent years on the water dealing with the elements. His hands were thick and calloused. Dirt lodged under his fingernails. The captain released the lines from the dock, turned, and headed back into the cabin while the five men lugged their coolers onto the boat. Moments later, the engine roared and the smell of diesel fuel filled the air. The vessel eased away from the dock and 20 minutes later was throttling down several miles from their starting point. When the boat came to a stop, the captain emerged. We're dropping anchor here. This is where the salmon are. Once your scrawny little arms get tired of hoisting salmon, we'll move further up the lake and stir up the trout. We'll finish the day with a few prize pike and yellow perch. This charter has a reputation for pulling at the dock with more fish than we know what to do with, so let's get those lines on the water. The captain finished his speech, turned, and disappeared back into his cabin. The five held their tongues until the cabin door shut, at which time they all burst out laughing. Where the hell did you find this guy? Steve asked Glenn. Salmon, trout, pike, yellow perch, what, no tuna? Shep chimed in. Even if it was somewhat entertaining to hear, the captain did manage to set the tone for an enjoyable afternoon on the lake. The men grabbed their rods, baited their hooks, and cast their lines. It didn't take long to see the rods bending and hear the frantic sounds of salmon slapping the deck. Justin Hart rubbed sleep from his eyes and poured himself a coffee. He pulled out his phone and confirmed that no new calls or messages had been received. Nancy Rooney, that server, she seldom missed a day of work, but when she did, she would always call in to let someone know. Hart dialed her number again, and it went to voicemail. He checked the time, 8:15 a.m. Then he threw on a vest over his long-sleeved flannel shirt, grabbed his keys, and walked briskly to his car. This morning, he needed to empty the restaurant safe and make a trip to the bank, but he'd make a detour along the way. The apartment complex where Nancy lived was old, surrounded by colorful foliage, and inhabited mostly by young and middle-aged tenants. Hart turned into the parking lot and drove directly to Nancy's assigned parking space. The lot was perhaps half full, which provided Hart a clear view of Nancy's small red Kia resting quietly in place. Parking in a nearby visitor spot, he got out and climbed the stairs to apartment 206 and knocked. He waited and knocked a second time, then a third. A neighbor across the hall in 205 opened the door. Hart turned around. Have you seen the woman who lives here? The man in 205, wearing baggy sweats and a full beard, looked over the stranger who had disturbed his late breakfast. Are you a cop? No, I'm her employer. Haven't heard from her in a couple of days and just stopping by to see if she's okay. The tenant seemed uninterested. No, sometimes I see her, but sometimes I don't see her for days. Hod nodded and retreated to his car. The Real Deal cruised down the center of Cayuga Lake. All the fish lines were pulled in and stowed for the day. At the back of the boat, the five friends sat facing each other and hoisted their beers into the air for a toast to the fish gods for their huge haul. The boat's massive bin, which had held only ice when the trip started, was now completely filled with salmon, trout, and pike. You know, I thought the captain of ours was a bit of a used car salesman, the way he promised all the fish we were going to catch. I don't know. Where's the yellow perch he promised? Vinny said, trying to be serious. Hey, all I know is there's going to be some good eating tonight, and probably for the next few nights as well, Glenn said. As the Real Deal approached its mooring, a crowd gathered on the deck. The captain eased the boat into its slip, and a young man who was waiting on the dock jumped onto the boat and threw a line out to waiting hands. The captain emerged from the cabin and looked over at the five, then pointed to the crowd. Every time I return, they gather at the dock to see if I made good on my promise of fish. And every time I return, I open up the bin and watch them gawk at the catch, the captain said with a tone of arrogance. One guy in the crowd yelled over to the five, Hey, you guys catch anything today? Vinny, sensing the guy was some sort of heckler, decided to give it back a little. Not that many, only around 30 or so. Maybe tomorrow will be a better day. The five men had a good laugh and opened the top bin to show off their catch. Everyone in the crowd just shook their head in amazement and walked away. Justin Hart was back at the restaurant at a table off to the side, keeping an eye on the lunch crowd while working on the shift schedule for the upcoming weekend. Nancy Rooney's shift began at 4 o'clock, and she had always made it a point to get there by 3:30 to grab a quick bite before her shift started. Justin looked at his phone, 3:40. Every time someone walked through the front door or out from the kitchen, Justin's head snapped to see if it was her. 4 o'clock came and went. At 5 minutes past 4, he called Gerard Martyr, the town's chief of police. Chief Martyr grew up 10 minutes from Eagles Point, began his career as a deputy at the age of 20, and at the age of 42 was elected chief. He was a large man with thick arms, calloused hands, and a scowl the townspeople knew well. Although the dark blue SUV with an Eagles Point police emblem on its side was often seen cruising through town, he'd rarely get out of it to engage with the community, as chiefs in other small towns were known to do. Martyr had no tolerance for lawlessness and never hesitated to jail anyone creating a disturbance in his town. Because it was a quiet town and safe to live in, none of the citizens ever questioned the chief or how he managed to live so well in his custom home on 15 prime acres on the edge of town. Hello, Chief. It's Justin over at the Rusty Nail. Was wondering if you could check into the whereabouts of one of my servers. Hasn't shown up for 2 days in a row, and that's never happened before. She doesn't answer her phone or her apartment door. Justin heard a long exhale on the other end as if he had inconvenienced the chief with his call. What's her name? He asked. Nancy Rooney. She lives over at the Redwoods apartment complex, apartment 206. Oh, one more thing. Her car, a little red Kia, is still parked there. All right, I'll let you know if I find anything, Chief Martyr grunted before he abruptly hung up. And that's where we end on 13.
Fantastic. Thank you for your reading today. I really enjoyed this book. I had a great time with it. I thought it was super twisty, and you brought in some nifty ideas along the way that I wasn't expecting, and that's always fun, especially for an editor. Um, you talked before about the trilogy and how you found that you probably should take more notes along the way than you did. Did you change that aspect of your writing with this book? Did you find yourself taking more notes, being more aware, or did you just pants it and let it go?
Well, I didn't take notes per se. Um, my style of writing, and maybe others do it this way, is I think of the story. I lay out the story, the beginning, the middle, and the end. I kind of know what the story's going to happen and some of the subplots in the middle. So I kind of think, how would I start the story? How would I end it? And then I write a couple of sentences for each chapter. And so when I have 50 chapters laid out, each with just a couple of sentences, then I go back to the very beginning, chapter one, and now I write to it, put the dialogue in, write the story, and that leads me to chapter two. And I do that along the way. I did that for all my books. The difference between this book and the trilogy, obviously, the trilogy, you have to maintain awareness of the characters and
Right.
situations and timeline, everything that's consistent. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. This book, I knew it would be a one off. I knew it would just be a standalone. So I didn't really, again, write down everything about the characters. I probably should get in that habit. I think that's a good habit to do. Just so even when you're late in the book, and thank you, Diana, you've taught me this. Um, you can be inconsistent in chapter 46 with something you said in chapter 5.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
the classic example of that is your main character has blue eyes in chapter 1 and green eyes in chapter 20. And that
yes,
those are details. That's kind of why editors exist, so that we can catch those details for you. But as a passionate plotter, I like to really keep track of all those notes, but I'm outnumbered most of the time, and most of the authors I've met write the way you do, just write it as it comes and let the editor do their job later.
yeah, and I'm fascinated by some authors I've spoken to who write from the seat of their pants. They have a story in mind, and they write as they go. And I'm fascinated by that because you know, that could take a long time to develop a story. And to me, when I set it out the way I do, all the branches of the tree are already evident to me. So I know where I'm going,
Sure. Yeah.
whereas
That's
they
a really
don't.
good way to describe that. That's awesome.
Yeah. But
Very
I
cool.
think the other way is cool too, because it allows your imagination really to let it go as it goes, and
Yep. I have said many times on this program, I'm fascinated by our publishing industry because there are so many different methodologies to producing a book, and none of them is the right way. Everybody does it differently, and I think it's a tremendously creative industry to be a part of.
oh, I've had a blast with it, and getting close to retirement. My NASA work, I love my NASA work, but I've done it for a long time, been involved in that, and this is obviously this is not going to pay the rent, but it's a
But it'll
passion.
certainly keep you out of trouble after into retirement.
It will. It'll keep your mind active, which is a must. And it's just fun to do. I'm getting a lot of great feedback from people,
Fabulous.
and I'm enjoying it. And now I'm starting to expand it a little bit. I'm getting it to airports and things of that nature. So it's a
Very
fun journey.
exciting. It is exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you came on the podcast today. I'm happy that you read this book and that it is doing so well for you. And I invite you, please come back again and read from the trilogy. I know that our listeners would love to be introduced to that collection of stories as well.
Oh, I'd love to. I think the trilogy is to me that's more my favorite right now, that genre. So
Sure.
yeah, I'd love to.
Excellent. We look forward to having you back. Have
Thank
an
you.
awesome day.
Thank you very much.